Hey, this is Danny here from Podcast Stories. Thanks so much for listening, and I'd love for you to get the latest episodes when they're released. So make sure to follow on your favourite podcast app or hop on over to podcasterstories.com/listen. If you enjoy the show and want to support it, you can do that at podcasterstories.com/support to join other supporters just like you. Thanks so much for being part of the Podcaster Stories community. And now, here's this week's episode. Hi, and welcome to Podcaster Stories. Each show we'll have a conversation with podcasters across all mediums and share their story, what motivates them, why they started their show, how they grew their show, and more. We'll also talk about their personal lives and some of the things that have happened that have made them the person they are today. And now, here's your host, Danny Brown. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Podcaster Stories, where we talk to the people behind the voices of the shows we listen to. This week, as you can maybe hear, we have more than one guest. we have Gini Dietrich, who's the CEO of Arment Dietrich, a PR and communications firm in Chicago, Illinois. And she's also the founder and host of the Spin Sucks blog and podcast. And it's a podcast we'll be talking about today. And we may also be talking about the little monkey that's in the background too. We'll see how it goes.
I told her she had to be quiet, and she said, "He can't hear me." I was like, "He can hear you."
Yeah, that's going to take some major noise editing. So, Ginny, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm great. Yep. How are you? It's been a long time since I've actually seen your face.
I know, and now my internet's choppy, so the camera's all choppy and what have you, so that's all fun. But yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I was thinking the last time we caught up was probably the event in Ottawa.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So, that's probably the last time I think we caught up, because I know we got together.
That was 2012, wasn't it?
Yep, because I know I'd been down in Chicago in 2010 before Ewan was born.
Yes.
And then maybe prior to that, we were at Blog World in Toronto.
Yep.
And then 2012, you did Social Mix.
Yeah, so I think it has been since then. That's crazy. Wow.
8 years. Mad.
8 years.
Wow. Once this is all back to some form of normality, we'll have to fix that.
Yes, we do have to fix that.
For sure. So, Judy, tell us a little about your show then.
It's funny. I was at Content Marketing World probably 3 years ago, and I met the chief marketing officer from Libsyn, and he said to me, you should start a podcast. You've been to my breakout session. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And he said, the interesting thing is that less than 1% are women hosts. So you would do really well just from that perspective. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. So I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it. And then I talked to my team about it. But it's just one of those things that was another thing that we had to do, right? And finally, a friend of mine said, you need to meet the women who used to produce my podcast. They've just started their own business. And so they came to me and they said, we're going to make it really easy for you. We can take your blog posts and repurpose them into content, and all you have to do is record. So that was 100 episodes ago.
Wow.
Here we are.
And that's crazy that you mentioned. This was 3 years ago that you met with the person, and you said that only 1% of hosts were female.
Yes.
I wonder what the number. Do you have like an idea of what that number would be now?
I don't know. I should ask him. Yeah. I can't imagine it's increased considerably, but
yeah, I know I see a lot of shows like on the web, like Apple or whatever, that are either co-hosted or hosted solely by women. But like you say, that's a crazy, sad number, and I guess being indicative of the communications industry in general.
Right. Well, yeah, true.
Or business in general.
Business in general, yeah.
But wow. So that was 3 years ago, and you're 100 episodes in, because you do a weekly show, right?
Weekly, yeah. So
you've been podcasting for 2 years?
Well, I did, yes, for the Spin Sucks. I've done Inside PR for 10 years now.
And right, because you did the live one. I think you did the live one at the PodCamp.
Yeah. So that was probably one of our first, I would think. Yeah,
right.
So it's been 10 years, yeah.
And so what's been the biggest challenge now that you've moved on to your own? Because obviously, like you mentioned, you've done the Inside PR podcast for X amount of years, but you're the sole host of the Spin Sucks podcast.
I am.
So what sort of lessons did you take from doing it on Inside PR, and what challenges you found doing your own show now?
The biggest challenge for me is that I'm not an auditory learner and I'm not a podcast listener. I just don't have time. And so going into that medium, it takes me twice as long to do that than it does to write a blog post. Or, I can sit down and pound out 4,000 words in about an hour, but I can't, for some reason, the podcast takes me significantly longer. So, and I think that's why. It's because that's not how I learn. But I keep at it because it is our number one driver of new business.
Oh, wow, that's cool. So
Yeah.
you're actually getting leads and direct
Yeah.
from the podcast.
A
Yeah.
lot.
That's awesome. I was speaking to our mutual friend Bob Reed, and he'd mentioned he'd got a lead from Reddit of all places.
Oh, no
Which was
kidding?
Yeah, it's like a little conversation on Reddit, and he's gone back and forth with this guy in South Korea about a lead for his agency, which is awesome.
Wow, that's cool.
So
Huh.
when you mentioned so that's your primary lead driver at the moment. Is that from clients that have listened to a show where it's spoken about something specific to their needs, or how is that played out?
Yeah, I think it's more along the lines of they listen and, you listen to this stuff and somebody's in your ears and you feel like you start to know them and trust them. I think it's more that than really specific things. Like, and certainly I talk about, some of the things that we do as an agency, and it's been sucks. And so it does lead to that thinking of, gosh, I think they can help us.
And to that point, then, how have you been driving the growth of the show? Obviously, you've been going 2 years. I didn't know that. Shows how ignorant I am. I thought it was like a fairly recent, maybe in the last 6 months, that you launched the podcast.
You know what's funny about that is we exploded in November. There were a couple of things that happened in November. One, so the production company used to write the scripts for me, and I took that over in November. So I think it became more authentic. And we promoted Laura Petrolino to chief marketing officer. And podcasting is her thing. She loves it. So she created a big promotional plan around it. So those two things, it exploded. We went from 70 or 80 downloads per episode, and now we're at 5,000.
Oh wow, that's crazy,
Exploded.
and that's just since November, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it makes sense that you would think that it's in the last 6 months.
Well, obviously, Laura's the smarter one out of the two, so you can notice the difference right
Right,
away.
for
Clearly.
sure, absolutely.
Clearly. So, what are some of the things that you're doing then to promote the podcast? Obviously, you're sharing it on your networks. What are some of the other things that you've found have worked for growing a show?
Really, we share it in email, we share it on the blog, and we share it in social. We don't really do anything beyond that.
Right, and then obviously you got word of mouth. I noticed that you've got a good chunk of reviews on iTunes, which is always good for
Yeah.
helping shows
Yeah.
get found in the directories.
Yeah, the reviews have helped. We also moved from Libsyn to Megaphone, and the data in that is better, I think. And I think it's helped us reach new audiences through that as well.
And so Megaphone's the host. Do they promote on their own channels as well? You've got like a section there where people can
Yep.
find you on Megaphone.
Yep.
Okay. And has the experience of moving from, say, co-hosting with, was it Martin and Joe inside PR
Yeah.
you do? Yeah, Martin and
Yeah.
Joe, right? That's right.
Yeah.
So moving from like a co-host to just running it yourself, what's the expectations? Has it lived up to your expectations? Have you had any specific challenges of being a solo podcaster from a team of three?
Yeah. So I probably shouldn't admit this out loud, but we would show up for our recording and spend 5 minutes beforehand discussing what we were going to talk about, and then we would record.
Right.
And now I'm like super methodical, and I think about what I'm going to do and how can I involve the community, and do we need to bring in listener comments, and what does that all look like? And there's a script, and then I write a blog post, and so it's a bigger commitment for sure.
And to that point, like you mentioned, do you plan ahead? I mean, obviously, because of the industry you're in, you can flip on a coin and adapt to a news story that's breaking that you might want to speak
Sure.
about. But you kind of use a content calendar and plan ahead what you want to speak about, like X amount of weeks or months down the line, or how do you plan that out?
Well, I will tell you that we did until the coronavirus.
Right.
And when that happened, we did switch on a dime, and we haven't gone back to the plan that we had because we've been sort of navigating the waters of what people are talking about, especially in the Spin Sucks community, and what we think they need. So at first it was, here's how you go virtual. And then it was, this is really hard, and here's some mindset things you can be thinking about. And then it was, you don't have to hustle and learn a new language or start a new business during this. Like, just protect yourself. And so we've kind of gone down that road versus more PR stuff for now.
Right.
Eventually, we'll flip back to the business stuff, but that's where we are right now.
And do you think maybe that's because a lot of businesses are obviously in the same boat as yourself? They're looking at challenges facing the clients, coming in and not churning clients, keeping team members employed. Do you think that switch has led to some of the you mentioned the leads earlier coming into your company? Is it leaders that are looking to do the same thing that are learning as they go, or
Yeah, and I would say it's yes. It's been interesting because we've been virtual since 2011. So the idea that it's overwhelming for people and that they don't know what to do is funny to me because it's just how we work, right? And we've had a lot of people come to us and say, "Can we hire you to help us kind of build this infrastructure and understand what it looks like?" For us, we're like, just get Zoom and Slack.
right?
But it's bigger than that. So some of the business that we've done during this is that kind of stuff, which is interesting.
And what are your goals for the future of the shop? I mean, you mentioned that obviously it started out as a PR stroke communications podcast,
Mhm.
and that's kind of taken a little bit of a backseat at the moment. But do you have like a big 1 year, 5 year plan kind of thing for the show and the direction it's going to take, and obviously continuing to offer leads, etc., and how that plays into your business?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, we want it to drive leads, and we launched the Peso Model certification in February with Syracuse University. So that's our big push for the next 12 months, at the very least. So we want to see, the podcast help with that. I really see it as an extension of the blog, which is professional development, and it's just a different way to get it. And if you're an auditory learner, it's an easier way for you to get it than to sit down and read a blog post or read a 4,000 word article.
Right. And I know you'd created was it the SpinSucks Academy or online academy?
Yeah.
Does the podcast play into that? Is that going to be featured as part of that, or like exclusive stuff for Academy members? Or
It will be eventually. Yeah, we're not quite there yet. We're actually working with a university in Canada that will help us build into that. But so that's coming.
okay, so obviously great Canadian minds again, helping the US out just for
Listen, I
sharing.
love my Canadians. You know that. I love
Yeah.
my Canadians.
Oh, that's cool. So who you working with? You allowed to say?
I'm not allowed to say yet, but it's somebody you would recognize.
Okay, so I would imagine maybe UOT. I'll have a look at that. Or it could be Sue. Sue. I'm going to stay quiet in case I'm not allowed to say anything. So I'm going to be after this. I'm going to be pinging on my Canadian friends that are at university, saying, "Okay, you're working. It's you, isn't it?" Oh, that's good. I look forward to that. So, as someone that's been multi-host podcast, and now your own host, what one piece of advice would you possibly give to, say, someone that's interested in following your footsteps and either starting a podcast or expanding their current content plan to complement it with some podcast episodes now and again? What's your piece of advice for them?
I would say two things. I would say find a co-host because it's easier, than having to do it yourself. And I also would, the other piece of advice is I would look at different models. Like everybody who podcasts does interviews. So is there a different way that you can look at podcasting that helps you stand out, that doesn't make you look like everybody else?
So, what advice would you give to me then? Not to sound like anybody else that's doing
Well, I
interviews,
don't think, first of all, listen to you. You don't sound like anybody else.
apart from
Uh,
Scottish podcasters.
right. Get an accent. I think the way that you're the I'm going to say something nice about you, and this is really hard for me. Okay, here we go. The way that you market the things that you're doing, and I've seen you evolve over the last decade and even longer. You do such a nice job of promoting what it is, what's coming, guests that you have. I mean, you've done a great job. It's been kind of fun on Facebook of talking about this podcast and what's coming in the lineup for this one. And you do such a nice job with that in a way that's authentic and interesting for people. You also are doing a different topic. You're not doing something about marketing or communications like everybody else. So the topic is interesting too.
How much do I owe you? Is that the $47? That's the going rate, right? Are we still on that $47 going rate?
I think we've got up to 97.
97. Inside joke on going rates for social media wonks and gurus selling courses. Okay, so to change things up a little bit, obviously we've got a little guest, a special guest with you today in the background there. I'm not sure, maybe the listeners will pick up on that or not. But so Addie, do you want to talk about Addie and how she came to be in your life? Because I know that's been a huge, it was like a big secret for the longest time. And then you were finally free to open up about that. I mean, that's gonna have, well, obviously it's been a huge change. No, so how did that come about? And what's been the biggest changes for that?
So I can't have my own children, and we looked at different ways to grow our family. And we went and talked to adoption agencies, and we did all this stuff. And one of the things we found, two things about adoption agencies here in the US. And one was that they needed you to have W-2s to show that you were employed. And because Kelly and I are both self-employed, we don't have W-2s. We have
Right.
tax returns, but we don't have W-2. And so they had a really hard time with that. And the other thing is that this was 2012. They wanted me, not Kelly, but me, to be available to drop everything and go live in another state for 3 to 6 months until the baby was born. And as a business owner, that wasn't something that I was able to do. And so it was really tough to sort of go down that. And I'm sure we could have jumped those hurdles, but they made it harder than it needed to be. And so we looked at foster care, and you go to foster care class and you sit in a room without windows every Saturday all day. And you learn about the bureaucracy of the foster care system is what you learn. And so then you pass and you get certified, and then you wait. And on January 14th, 2014, we got a phone call, and they said, we have a baby girl. She's in emergency care. Can we put her with you while we figure things out? And we were like, we're not in this to give the child back, essentially. We're in this to build our family. And the social worker said, I have a feeling about this. I don't think she's going back to her mother. And she didn't. So we went through the whole process of, we had to show up 3 days a week to the library so that the biological mother could see her. And the biological mother didn't show up. But we had to prove that we were there, and I had to fill out these forms every 3 days a week that showed that we were there and that we waited for an hour and all those kinds of things. And after 90 days of not showing up, then they said, okay, well, you only have to do it once a week. And so we did that once a week, every week. And again, she didn't show up. And so then 90 days after that, they reduced it to once a month. And one of those times she did show up, and she said to me, can I talk to you alone for a minute? And she pulled me aside and she said, would you be interested in adopting Addie? And I was like, what? Yes. And there was a lot of back and forth. Like she was very young, and she knew that was the right thing to do, but she was also getting pressure from her family not to do it. And so there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of court appointments and dates and all that kind of stuff. But in November of 2017, we were able to finally adopt her. So it was almost 4 years of that back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
And that must have been, I mean, I can only imagine how frustrating that must have been to be so close at times and then be wary of, is it going to happen? Now, I mean, was there any times that you just thought, this is not going to happen? We can't keep doing this, or was it not never an option really?
It sort of wasn't an option. Like I don't think we ever thought that it wouldn't happen. But they have to do everything. The court system has to do everything they can to make sure that later one of the biological parents, does not come back and try to get the child.
Right.
So they had to try to alert the father, but she didn't know who the father was, so that we had to alert 3 different men, and then we had to put something in the paper. And so there's like all of this stuff that has to happen, and there's time in between that it takes. And finally, the judge was like, "Yeah, you guys don't need to worry. Like, we just need to run through the."
Right.
But it took, she was almost 4 when
Wow.
when we finally.
And that was 2017. So now she just celebrated her 6th birthday recently.
7th.
7th. Wow. And she's like a chirpy little one. It's,
But she talked.
yeah. Well, one of the things that I've been enjoying, I know on Facebook, and that's and I think that's been one of the cool things to following this story along is you're a pretty outgoing and gregarious person generally. But you couldn't obviously share what was going through, your life at the time with Addie.
Right,
And now,
right.
now you're allowed to speak about it. And during the quarantine time, one of the cool things that we're seeing is you sharing on Facebook your daily updates about how family Dietrich is getting through this, and that's going to be fun. But you also share that, like any parent, their kids think they're rotten. And they want to be in a different family and are going to pack up and leave home. What's been some of the fun challenges of being a mom?
I mean, it's my favorite title of all, and you love being a parent too. It's one of the best things ever. But yeah, she's a sassy little thing, and it's funny because people will say she's so you. I mean, nature versus nurture there, but um, she's just like every other kid. She did pack her suitcase at the start of this and was like, I'm going to live with my friend because I don't like you. And I was like, all right, well, you're not going to like your friend's mom more than you like me, but
Right.
okay.
Right. And then has there been any more like that, or do you have like your little daily battles, or is it pretty much okay?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's more along the lines of, she's just, I'm sure your kids are doing this too. They miss their friends. They miss the routine. They miss being able to be outside. They miss going to recess. They miss the social piece. They miss the routine and the structure of school. Like we're recording this on a Friday and we haven't done any school today because I'm just like, it is what it is, and she'll say things like, you're not doing it right, or you're not my teacher, and it depends on the day. Some days I'm just like, I get it, kid. And then other days it makes me cry, but
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's a joy. I always think being a parent is one of the most equally rewarding and unrewarding, jobs that
right.
we will ever have. Because no matter what we do, we will suck at something.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so okay, so who's your all-time hero and why?
Who's my all-time hero and why? I would say my mom. She's just my rock. She's my rock. She's always been there for me. She's always known exactly what to say. Sometimes she says things that I don't want to hear but need to hear, and she's my best friend.
All right. Is Mother's Day coming up soon?
Mother's Day is coming up soon.
So you can have
Matter
like
of fact.
a double celebration then, 'cause you have yourself and obviously your mum.
Yeah.
So what are you guys doing? Do you guys communicate via Zoom at the moment then when do you get like screen time, FaceTimes?
Yeah, with FaceTime and text. I text her
Yeah.
constantly.
Well, I know I wrote a blog post a few years back about, why you shouldn't be scared of upsetting Gini Dietrich's mum. I'll have to try hunt that down. See what I'd said, and I'll send it over for a Mother's Day gift.
That's funny.
So, Ginny, this is like I really enjoyed catching up with you. Like you say, it's been almost 10 years since we've actually been in the same room, which is kind of
Yeah,
weird.
that's
Yeah,
crazy.
to think about that. For people that want to find you online and listen to the podcast and connect with you, where's the best place for them to catch you?
Spinsucks.com.
And so everything will feed out from there. They can find you on Facebook, Twitter. They can find the podcast and everything over
Yep.
there. And
Everything's
also, I'll
there.
drop the links to the show and the site and everything in the show notes.
Oh, thank you.
All righty.
Thank you.
Okay, well, guys, again, Ginny, thanks for appearing on the show. I really appreciate it. I love the fact that we had a little guest for about 3/4 of the show, which I think it's going to be so like everybody's going to realize that this is what we do during this
Yeah,
time, right?
yeah,
We've got
that's
kids in
what
the
it
house.
is.
We're trying to do what we do.
Yep.
Hopefully, your family's keeping well. I know. What's Kelly doing these days? He's still working in the political arena.
He is, and people are so mad at Trump that he's doing very well.
So that's good then. It's got a lot of leads there. You'll be hoping it continues
Yeah,
for another
exactly.
few months anyway. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. I hope people, check out your podcast. Like you say, it's a different kind of podcast for the communications industry at the moment. It's really helping people understand, what's going on now and how to get through it, and then getting back into the communication side later. Until next week, guys, this has been Danny on Podcaster Stories. If you enjoyed this week's show, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode when it comes out. Until the next time, take care and we'll speak soon. You've been listening to Podcaster Stories. If you enjoyed this week's show, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And feel free to leave a review on iTunes to help others find the show too. And we'll see you the next time on Podcaster Stories.